The fluorescent lights of the police station conference room hummed with an electric tension that could be felt in every corner. Detective Marcus Webb stood at the head of the mahogany table, his jaw clenched so tight it could crack diamonds. His pressed uniform, adorned with commendations and medals, suddenly felt like a costume, a disguise that was about to be ripped away. Across from him sat the woman he had pulled over just 3 weeks ago, the woman he had forced to wait in the rain for 45 minutes while he ran her license. The woman whose designer suit he had mocked, whose credentials he had questioned, whose very presence in an upscale neighborhood he had deemed suspicious. But today, she wasn't standing on a darkened street corner, rain-soaked and humiliated. Today, Dr. Jasmine Carter sat in the leather chair reserved for the newly appointed commissioner of the Metropolitan Police Department. And she was holding a file with his name on it. Detective Webb, her voice was steady, measured, carrying the weight of authority and something else. Justice deferred but not denied. We need to talk about your conduct on the evening of September 15th. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Around the table, 5 other officers shifted uncomfortably. Deputy Chief Rodriguez wouldn't meet his eyes. Captain Morrison stared at his own hands as if they held the secrets of the universe. This couldn't be happening. Not to him, not to a 15-year veteran with 3 citations for valor, but it was happening. And as Dr. Carter opened that file, Marcus Webb's world began to crumble, one damning page at a time. But to understand how we arrived at this moment of reckoning, we need to go back to where Jasmine Carter's journey truly began. 28 years earlier, in the Riverside projects of South Memphis, a 7-year-old girl sat on a fire escape, watching police cruisers circle her neighborhood like sharks. Her mother, Sarah Carter, worked double shifts as a nurse's aide, barely making enough to keep the lights on in their 2-bedroom apartment they shared with Jasmine's grandmother. But young Jasmine was different. Even then, her teachers noticed something extraordinary, a mind that absorbed information like a sponge, that questioned everything, that refused to accept because that's how it is, as an answer. Baby girl, her grandmother, Mama Ruth, would say, "You got something special in that head of yours. Don't let this place tell you what you can't be." Mama Ruth had seen too much. She'd lived through segregation, through the civil rights movement, through decades of promises broken and dreams deferred. But she had hope, all of it invested in her brilliant granddaughter. Jasmine excelled despite everything. While her classmates struggled with basic math, she was solving algebra problems she'd taught herself from library books. While others skipped school, she was there every single day, front row, hand raised, hungry for knowledge, that felt like the only ladder out of poverty. Then came the scholarship to Riverside Academy, a prestigious private school across town. At 12 years old, Jasmine Carter walked through doors that had never been opened to someone who looked like her, someone from where she was from. The culture shock was immediate and brutal. "Where did you say you're from?" Madison Whitmore, daughter of real estate magnate Charles Whitmore, asked with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Riverside," Jasmine answered honestly. The whispers started immediately. "The projects? Is that even safe? I heard someone was shot there last week." But Jasmine had learned early that the best revenge was success. She doubled down on her studies, perfect grades in honors classes, captain of the debate team by sophomore year, early acceptance to Harvard at 6. Her mother cried the day that letter arrived. Mama Ruth held it in her trembling hands and whispered, "I knew it. I always knew it." Harvard was a revelation. For the first time in her life, Jasmine was surrounded by people who valued intellect over zip code. She majored in public policy with a minor in criminal justice, driven by memories of her neighborhood, of the complicated relationship between her community and law enforcement. She remembered being 9 years old, watching Officer Patterson help Miss Jenkins carry groceries up 4 flights of stairs. She also remembered being 12, watching 3 cops slam her cousin Marcus against a wall for matching a description. Police weren't simple villains or heroes. They were human beings with power, and power without accountability was dangerous. After Harvard came a doctorate from Yale. Her dissertation, Systemic Reform in Urban Policing, a Framework for Accountability and Community Trust, was published in 3 major journals. At 28, she was consulting for police departments across the country. But Jasmine wanted more than theory. She wanted real change on the ground, in the communities that needed it most. She spent 5 years as deputy commissioner in Philadelphia, implementing revolutionary changes, mandatory bias training that actually worked, community oversight boards with real power, body cameras that couldn't be accidentally turned off. Crime rates fell, community trust rose. Officers reported feeling more supported, not less. The data was undeniable. When the position of commissioner opened in her home state, overseeing the same police department that had served her childhood neighborhood, Jasmine knew it was destiny calling her home. Her mother was now 62, still working, still in the same neighborhood. Mama Ruth was 87, her memory fading but her pride in her granddaughter bright as ever. "I'm coming home," Jasmine told them over the phone, "and I'm going to make things better." The appointment process was grueling. The mayor's selection committee included business leaders, community activists, current police officials, and citizens. She faced hours of questioning, scrutiny of every decision she'd ever made, every policy she'd ever implemented. But her record spoke for itself. After 3 months of deliberation, the announcement came. Dr. Jasmine Carter would be the new commissioner, the first black woman to hold the position in the department's fort. She had 2 weeks to relocate, to set up her office, to prepare for the massive responsibility ahead. What she didn't know was that on September 15th, just 16 days before she would officially take office, her life would intersect with Detective Marcus Webb in a way that would test everything she believed about justice, power, and redemption. September 15th started like any other day for Marcus Webb. 15 years on the force, 43 years old, 2 kids in college, a wife who taught 3rd grade, a mortgage on a nice house in the suburbs. Marcus considered himself a good. He'd never taken a bribe, never planted evidence, never used excessive force. He'd even testified against a fellow officer once, years ago, which hadn't made him popular in certain circles. But Marcus had his blind spots he didn't even recognize as such. At 8:47 p.m., he was patrolling the Oakmont district, a wealthy neighborhood of tree-lined streets and houses that started at $800,000. His partner had called in sick, so Marcus was solo, which meant the night was his to handle as he saw fit. That's when he saw the black Mercedes S-Class with tinted windows, moving slowly down Elm Street. Something about it triggered his instincts. High-end car, tinted windows, driving slowly, like the driver was casing houses. Marcus hit his light. The Mercedes pulled over immediately, smoothly, into a driveway. Marcus approached the driver's side, hand near his weapon. Standard procedure, he told himself. The window rolled down. Dr. Jasmine Carter, wearing a tailored pantsuit and pearl earrings, looked up at him with patient eyes. She had just come from a dinner meeting with the deputy mayor, finalizing her transition plan. She was less than a mile from the townhouse she'd just leased in this very neighborhood. "Good evening, officer. Is there a problem?" Marcus's eyes swept the interior of the car. Clean, no visible contraband. But something made him push. Maybe it was the long day. Maybe it was the expensive car. Maybe it was something deeper, something uglier that he would never admit even to himself. "License and registration. What are you doing in this neighborhood?" Jasmine felt the familiar tightening in her chest. The feeling every black person knows when they realize the rules are different for them. But she remained calm. She had been here before in different forms, her entire life. "I live here, officer. Well, I'm moving in next week. The townhouse right there." She pointed to the elegant brick building with the sold sign still in the yard. Marcus's eyes narrowed. "License and registration," he repeated, his tone hardening. She handed them over, her movements slow and deliberate. No sudden moves, hands visible. The survival arithmetic that had been taught to her since childhood. Marcus walked back to his cruiser, taking his time. He ran her license. Everything came back clean. Perfect record. No warrants, no history. But he made her wait, and wait. The rain started light at first, then heavier. Jasmine's window was still down as per Marcus's instructions. She felt the water hitting her shoulder, soaking into her expensive suit. 45 minutes passed. Finally, Marcus returned. He handed back her documents without a word. "Am I free to go?" Jasmine asked, her voice still controlled, but with an edge now. "Watch your speed, and maybe think about whether this is really the right neighborhood for you." The words hung in the rain-heavy air between them. Jasmine looked at his badge number, 240F47, and then at his nameplate, Webb. She didn't say anything else. She rolled up her window and pulled away, water dripping from her sleeve, her hand trembling slightly on the steering wheel, not from fear, but from suppressed rage. Marcus watched her go, feeling satisfied that he'd handled a potential problem. He didn't write a report. There had been no ticket, no incident worth documenting. He had no idea who she was. He had no idea that in 16 days that woman would have the power to end his career. Jasmine sat in her temporary apartment that night, still in her damp suit, staring at the business card of Officer Marcus Webb. She had looked him up online using his badge number and name. The encounter played in her mind like a bad movie on repeat. Part of her wanted to file a complaint immediately, but she knew how that would look. The incoming commissioner crying foul before she'd even started the job. It would undermine her authority before she had any. So she made a different choice. She would wait. She would document everything. The time, the location, the weather, her version of events. She would investigate. But more than that, she would see who Marcus Webb really was. Over the next 2 weeks, Jasmine did something unusual. She requested all of Marcus Webb's personnel records through official channels, framing it as part of her transition research, reviewing the records of officers across all departments to understand her new force. What she found troubled her deeply. Marcus had a clean record on paper, 15 years, 3 commendations, 1 medal for bravery after pulling a family from a burning car. His arrest record was solid. His clearance rate was above average. But then she looked deeper. She cross-referenced his traffic stops over the past 5 years. The pattern was unmistakable. Black drivers, 67% stop rate in his patrol zones. White drivers, 23% stop rate. Hispanic drivers, 8%. Other, 2%. The neighborhood demographics didn't support these numbers, not even close. She reviewed his body camera footage, the occasions when it was actually on, which was suspicious in itself. She found 43 instances in the past 2 years, where his camera was malfunctioning during traffic stops in affluent neighborhoods. But the footage that existed told a story. Terse interactions with black motorists, extended wait times, questions about what they were doing in this area. With white motorists, quick, professional, courteous, have a nice evening. Then Jasmine found the complaints, 7 of them over 5 years, all dismissed after internal review, all from black citizens, all describing similar experiences to what she had endured. One was from a black doctor who had been stopped while driving to the hospital for an emergency surgery. Marcus had made him wait 30 minutes, despite the doctor's explanations. The patient died. The complaint was dismissed as unprovable because Marcus's body camera had been off. Another was from a 16-year-old honor student, stopped while walking home from debate practice in his own neighborhood. Marcus had detained him for 2 hours, searching him repeatedly, calling him suspicious. The kid's mother filed a complaint. It was marked as unfounded. Jasmine felt sick. This wasn't just one bad encounter. This was a pattern the system had ignored, had buried, had protected. But Jasmine wasn't the system. Not anymore. She was about to become the person in charge of changing it. October 1st arrived with the crispness of autumn. Jasmine Carter walked into the Metropolitan Police headquarters for her first day as commissioner, wearing a navy power suit and carrying a leather briefcase that had belonged to Mama Ruth, a gift from decades ago, cherished and preserved. The building was an imposing structure of concrete and glass, built in the 1970s and renovated twice since. Inside, the walls were lined with photographs of commissioners past 27 men, all white, staring down at her from their frames. Soon her photograph would join them, a different face, a different story. The command staff assembled in the main conference room for her first address. Deputy Chief Rodriguez, Captain Morrison, 4 department heads, and 15 senior officers, including Detective Marcus Webb, who had been selected to represent the detective division. Marcus sat 3 seats from the front, arms crossed, expression skeptical. He'd heard about the new commissioner, some Ivy League academic, who'd never worked a real beat, probably going to come in with a bunch of theoretical nonsense about community policing and systemic reform. He was prepared to be unimpressed. Then Jasmine walked in, and Marcus's world tilted on its axis. Time seemed to freeze. His brain struggled to process what his eyes were seeing. That was, but she couldn't be the woman. "Good morning," Jasmine said, her voice filling the room with quiet authority. "I'm Commissioner Carter. I'm honored to be here, and I'm looking forward to working with each of you to build a police force that serves all citizens with integrity, professionalism, and fairness." Her eyes swept the room, pausing briefly, so briefly most wouldn't notice on Marcus. A flicker of recognition, then moving on. Marcus felt his stomach drop like an elevator with cut cables. She knew, of course she knew. He wanted to sink through the floor, to disappear, to wake up from this nightmare. But he was trapped in his chair, surrounded by colleagues, forced to sit through a 40-minute presentation about accountability, bias training, and community oversight. Every word felt aimed directly at him. "Our data shows troubling disparities in traffic stops, searches, and use of force across different communities," Jasmine said, clicking to a slide that showed statistics Marcus recognized, because they were his statistics, his stops, his numbers. "These patterns are unacceptable, and will be addressed systematically." After the meeting, Marcus bolted for the door, but Deputy Chief Rodriguez caught his arm. "Webb, hang back. Commissioner wants to meet with division representatives, individually today. You're up at..." Marcus's mouth went dry. I have a case. Cancel it. This is priority 1. At 1:55 p.m., Marcus stood outside the commissioner's office, his palms sweating, his mind racing through possible strategies. Apologize immediately, play dumb, claim he didn't remember, but he knew none of those would work. Not with her, not with those eyes that had looked at him through the rain, patient and measured, even as he humiliated her. "Detective Webb," her assistant called. "Commissioner will see you now." Marcus walked in. The office was already decorated with her credentials, framed degrees from Harvard and Yale, photographs with mayors and police chiefs from Philadelphia, a picture of an elderly black woman, who must have been her grandmother, and on her desk, a file folder labeled Webb, Marcus badge. Jasmine gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Please sit, detective." Marcus sat, feeling like a child called to the principal's office. "I imagine you remember me," Jasmine said calmly. "Commissioner, I didn't know who you were. If you had known I was going to be your boss, you would have treated me with respect," Jasmine finished. "So the problem isn't that you stopped me without cause, made me wait in the rain for 45 minutes, and suggested I didn't belong in my own neighborhood. The problem is that you didn't know who I was." Marcus had no answer. "That wouldn't make it worse. I've reviewed your record, Detective Webb," Jasmine continued, opening the file. 15 years of service, 3 commendations, but also a pattern, a disturbing pattern, of disparate treatment in your traffic stops and interactions with citizens of color. With all due respect, Commissioner, those statistics can be misleading, can they?" Jasmine's voice sharpened. "Explain to me how a neighborhood that's 40% black, 30% white, and 25% Hispanic results in your stops being 67% black. Explain the 43 times your body camera malfunctioned during stops in affluent areas. Explain the 7 complaints that were dismissed without proper investigation." Marcus felt trapped. Every excuse he could think of sounded hollow, defensive, worse than silence. "I've spent the past 2 weeks," Jasmine said, "trying to decide what to do about you, Detective Webb. Part of me wanted to fire you on day 1, make an example, show this department that the old ways are over." Marcus's career flashed before his eyes. The pension he was 5 years from, his kids' college tuition, his wife's face when he came home and told her he'd been fired. "But then I thought about what I'm really trying to build here," Jasmine continued. "I don't want to just punish bad cops. I want to transform them into good ones, if they're willing to do the work." She leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. "So here's what's going to happen, Detective Webb. You are going to become the pilot case for my new accountability and training program. You will undergo intensive bias training, not the checkbox kind, the real kind. You will be partnered with Officer Jamal Thompson, a black officer who I'm bringing in from Philadelphia specifically for this. You will have your stops reviewed weekly, your body camera will be inspected daily, and if it malfunctions even once, you're suspended pending review. Marcus opened his mouth, but Jasmine wasn't finished. You will also participate in monthly community dialogues where citizens can directly address their concerns with officers. You will volunteer 40 hours in the Riverside community. Yes, the projects where I grew up, and you will meet with me personally every month to discuss your progress. And if I refuse, Marcus asked quietly, then you're fired, Jasmine said simply. And I'll make sure every news outlet in the city knows exactly why with your stop statistics, body camera records, and the video from your dash cam, the night you stopped me. Yes, I subpoenaed it. All 45 minutes of me sitting in the rain, while you sat in your warm cruiser doing absolutely nothing. Marcus felt the walls closing in, but through his panic, a strange realization emerged. She wasn't just punishing him, she was offering him a chance he probably didn't deserve. I'll do it, he said. Whatever you want, I'll do it. Jasmine studied him for a long moment. I'm not doing this for you, Detective Webb. I'm doing this because I have to believe that people can change. Because if they can't, then everything I'm trying to build here is pointless. She stood, signaling the meeting was over. Don't make me regret giving you this chance. The next 6 months were the hardest of Marcus Webb's career, and the most transformative. His new partner, Officer Jamal Thompson, was everything Marcus wasn't expecting. A 28-year-old with a degree in sociology, Jamal had worked in Philadelphia's toughest districts while maintaining some of the best community relations scores in the department. Their first week together was tense. Marcus resented being babysat. Jamal resented being put on babysitting duty. Look, Jamal said on day 3 after a particularly awkward shift, I know you don't want me here, but Commissioner Carter believes in second chances. So I'm going to ask you one question, and I want an honest answer. Do you think you have a problem? Marcus's instinct was to say no, to defend himself, to list all the reasons his statistics weren't his fault. But sitting in that patrol car, with Jamal's patient eyes on him, Marcus thought about that night, about making Jasmine wait in the rain, about his immediate assumption that she didn't belong in that neighborhood. I don't know, he said finally. I thought I was a good cop. I thought I was doing my job. Did you feel threatened by her? Jamal asked. No. Did you have probable cause to stop her? Marcus hesitated. She was driving slowly, in a residential neighborhood, at night, like someone who's not sure which house they're looking for. Yeah. So why'd you make her wait 45 minutes? And there it was, the question Marcus had been avoiding. Why had he made her? There was no procedural reason. Her license was clean, her registration current. He could have let her go in 5 minutes. I wanted her to know, Marcus said slowly, the realization dawning even as he spoke, that she didn't belong there. Jamal nodded. Now we're getting somewhere. The bias training wasn't like anything Marcus had experienced before. It wasn't a lecture about not using slurs, or a video about diversity. It was deeper, more uncomfortable, more real. The trainer, Dr. Michelle Okonkwo, showed them test results, implicit association tests, that revealed biases people didn't even know they had. Marcus took the test and discovered that despite consciously believing he treated everyone equally, his automatic associations linked black faces with danger and white faces with safety. This isn't about calling you racist, Dr. Okonkwo explained. These biases exist in all of us. They're formed by media, culture, experience. The question is, what do you do once you're aware of them? The answer was work. Constant, conscious work. Marcus started paying attention to his assumption. When he saw a young black man in a hoodie, he noticed the automatic tension in his shoulders and consciously relaxed them. When he saw a white teenager doing the same thing, he noticed how different his emotional response was. The community dialogues were brutal. Sitting in a room with people who had been stopped, searched, humiliated, hearing their stories, seeing their pain, was harder than any day on the street. A woman named Keisha spoke about her son being stopped 7 times in 1 year, always matching a description, always released without charges, but traumatized by the experience. He was 4. An older man named Leonard described being pulled from his car at gunpoint, because his expensive SUV was suspicious in his own neighborhood. He was a retired postal worker. The SUV was 12 years old. Marcus listened, really listened, and slowly, painfully, began to understand what he had been doing, what he had been part of. The 40 hours in Riverside changed him even more. Working with community programs, meeting residents, seeing the neighborhood not as a crime statistic, but as a community full of families trying to make it. It shattered his assumptions. He met Mama Ruth, who at 87 still had her wits about her on good days. She told him stories about Jasmine as a girl, so brilliant and determined even then. "She's trying to fix things," Mama Ruth said, her weathered hand patting his. "You help her do that, young man. Help her make it better." By month 3, something shifted. Marcus's stop statistics began to balance. His interactions with citizens became more courteous, more patient. His body camera was never off. Jamal noticed the change. "You're getting it," he said one night, after a shift where Marcus had handled a tense traffic stop with a young black driver with perfect professionalism. "I've been thinking about that doctor," Marcus said. "The one who complained about me stopping him on his way to surgery. His patient. Yeah, I did that. My actions, my need to prove I was in control cost someone their life." "You can't change the past," Jamal said, "but you can change the future." The monthly meetings with Commissioner Carter were Marcus's report card. At first she was skeptical, clearly waiting for him to slip up to reveal that this was all an act. But by the 4th month, something shifted in her expression too. "Your numbers are improving," she said, reviewing his stats. "More importantly, your community feedback is positive. You got 3 compliments this month." "I've been trying," Marcus said simply. "I know," Jasmine replied. "I'm seeing it." Then came the night that would test everything Marcus had learned. It was February 3rd, 10:47 p.m. Marcus and Jamal were patrolling near Oakmont, the same neighborhood where Marcus had stopped Jasmine 5 months earlier. A call came through. Suspicious person walking through yards. Possible burglary in progress. They arrived to find a young black man, maybe 19 or 20, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans, walking quickly between houses. When he saw the patrol car, he ran. The old Marcus would have chased him down, thrown him against a wall, assumed guilt. The new Marcus hesitated. "What are you thinking?" Jamal asked, watching him. 5 months ago, I would have called for backup and treated him like a violent felon," Marcus said. "But something doesn't feel right." "Like what?" He ran toward that house, not away from the neighborhood. And his body language, it wasn't guilty, it was scared. They approached cautiously, professionally. They found the young man sitting on a porch, hands visible, breathing hard. "Sir, we received a call about a suspicious person. Can you tell me what you're doing here?" Marcus kept his voice calm, non-threatening. The young man looked terrified. I'm staying here. This is my aunt's house. I'm visiting from Chicago. Can you prove that?" "My aunt's inside, Patterson. She's lived here 20 years. Marcus knocked. An older black woman answered, confused by the late hour. "Joshua, what's going on? Are you Mrs. Patterson?" Marcus asked. "Yes, officer. Is there a problem?" "We received a call about a suspicious person." "This is your nephew?" "Yes, that's Joshua. He's visiting for the week. Did someone call about him walking around our own neighborhood?" Marcus's jaw tightened. This was exactly the kind of call he'd responded to dozens of times. A black person, in a nice neighborhood, being reported as suspicious, simply for existing. "We're sorry to have bothered you, Mrs. Patterson. Have a good evening." Back in the car, Jamal smiled. "You handled that perfectly. That could have gone so differently," Marcus said. 5 months ago, I would have put that kid in handcuffs, searched him. Maybe found some excuse to bring him in. And for what? Walking while black in his aunt's neighborhood. "But you didn't," Jamal said. "That's growth." Marcus filed a report about the incident, noting that the call itself was problematic. A resident reporting someone as suspicious, based solely on race. He recommended the department follow up with the caller about making false reports. Commissioner Carter read that report, and for the first time she allowed herself to believe that real change might be possible. But Marcus Webb wasn't the only officer Commissioner Carter was watching. Her broader investigation into department practices had uncovered something far more troubling than individual bias. It had exposed systematic corruption. It started with a pattern in the data. Certain neighborhoods had dramatically higher arrest rates for minor offenses, arrests that rarely led to convictions, but generated significant fines and court fees. Following the money revealed something disturbing: a quota system. Officers in specific units were being pressured to hit minimum numbers for citations and arrests, particularly in lower-income neighborhoods. And the pressure was coming from the top. Captain Thomas Morrison, a 30-year veteran and one of the most powerful figures in the department, was behind it. Morrison had his reasons, twisted as they were. The city's budget was tight. The department needed to justify its existence with numbers. And Morrison had learned that poor neighborhoods, particularly communities of color, pushed back less. They couldn't afford lawyers. They were less likely to complain. They were easier targets. It was policing for profit, and it was destroying community trust. Jasmine spent 3 months building her case, working with the city's oversight board and the district attorney's office. She documented everything: emails from Morrison pressuring supervisors, testimony from officers who had been told to increase productivity, data showing how arrest patterns shifted when Morrison took over specific precincts. But Morrison wasn't going down without a fight. He was connected friends in the mayor's office, relationships with powerful families, a network built over 3 decades. He knew where bodies were buried, metaphorically speaking. When word leaked that Commissioner Carter was investigating him, Morrison struck first. He called a press conference, claiming that the new commissioner was soft on crime and was handcuffing officers with her politically correct reforms. He painted himself as a defender of real police work against bureaucratic interference. The media loved it. Police civil war. Veteran captain challenges new commissioner, read the headlines. Morrison thought he'd won. He had the press. He had public support from several officer unions. He had political cover. What he didn't have was the evidence, and Jasmine Carter had mountains of it. She scheduled a public hearing with the city council's police oversight committee. Morrison would be required to attend. So would key officers from his command chain. So would Marcus Webb, who had served under Morrison for 8 years and had testimony that would be crucial. 3 days before the hearing, Morrison cornered Marcus in the station parking lot. "Webb, you and I need to talk." Marcus felt a chill. He'd been avoiding Morrison for months, ever since starting the accountability program. "What about, Captain? This witch hunt Carter is running. She's going to call you to testify, and I need to know you'll tell the truth." "The truth?" Marcus asked. "That her reforms are nonsense, that real police work requires flexibility, that quotas, which we don't officially have, are just performance metrics, that we've been doing our jobs the way we've always done them." Marcus saw it clearly now. Morrison wasn't just defending policy. He was trying to intimidate a witness. The old Marcus would have folded, would have backed his captain, would have protected the brotherhood. But the new Marcus thought about Keisha's 14-year-old son, about the doctor whose patient died, about Jasmine standing in the rain while he let his power go to his head. "I'm going to tell the truth, Captain. The whole truth." Morrison's face darkened. "You're making a mistake, Webb. When Carter's gone, and she will be gone, you'll still have to work here, with us. Remember that." "I'll take my chances," Marcus said, walking away before Morrison could respond. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He was about to testify against a superior officer, violate the blue wall of silence, potentially destroy his own career. His wife Carmen found him at 2 a.m., staring at his service weapon and badge on the kitchen table. "You doing the right thing?" she asked, softly. "I think so. I hope so." "Then that's all that matters." She put her hand on his shoulder. "I didn't fall in love with a corrupt cop. I fell in love with a man who wanted to protect people. Be that man." The city council chamber was packed. News cameras lined the back wall. Citizens filled every seat, spilling into the aisles. This wasn't just a departmental hearing. It was a referendum on the future of policing in the city. On one side sat Commissioner Jasmine Carter, flanked by her legal team and supporting officers, including Jamal Thompson. On the other side sat Captain Thomas Morrison, his lawyer, and a row of officers loyal to him, men who had served under him for years, who owed him their promotions, their positions. Between them sat the witnesses, including Marcus Webb. Council President Andrea Walsh called the hearing to order. We're here to examine allegations of systematic misconduct within the Metropolitan Police Department, specifically regarding quota systems for arrests and citations, disparate enforcement practices, and retaliation against officers who refuse to comply. Commissioner Carter, your opening statement. Jasmine stood, her voice clear and commanding. Thank you, Council President. Over the past 6 months, my office has uncovered evidence of a systematic practice that prioritizes numbers over justice, revenue over community safety. Captain Morrison instituted an informal but rigidly enforced quota system that pressured officers to maximize arrests and citations, particularly in lower-income neighborhoods. This practice is not only ethically wrong, it's illegal. It violates our city charter, our department policies, and the constitutional rights of our citizens. She clicked to a presentation showing graphs, emails, testimony. These emails, Jasmine continued, show Captain Morrison explicitly instructing supervisors to increase productivity in specific precincts, all of which serve predominantly Black and Hispanic communities. Here's one from August 2023. Unit 7 is underperforming. I need to see at least 50 citations this month or heads will roll. She clicked to the next slide. This chart shows arrest patterns before and after Morrison took command of the South District. Minor offenses, jaywalking, loitering, broken taillights, increased by 3, but conviction, they actually decreased. Why? Because these weren't legitimate arrests based on public safety. They were revenue generation. Morrison's lawyer stood. Objection. The commissioner is conflating performance standards with quotas. Every department has metrics. Performance standards don't target specific neighborhoods. Jasmine interrupted. Performance standards don't result in a Black driver being 3 times more likely to be stopped than a white driver in the same area. Performance standards don't lead to officers being threatened with demotion if they don't hit arbitrary numbers. Council President Walsh nodded. Overruled. Continue, Commissioner. Jasmine took a breath. This was the moment. I'd like to call my first witness, Detective Marcus Webb. The room stirred. Morrison's eyes locked on Marcus with barely concealed fury. Marcus walked to the witness chair, was sworn in, and sat down. His hands were steady, but inside his heart hammered against his ribs. Detective Webb, Jasmine began. You served under Captain Morrison's command for 8 years. During that time, did you ever receive explicit or implicit pressure to meet arrest or citation quotas? Marcus looked at Morrison, then at the packed chamber, then at Jazz. He thought about Mama Ruth saying, "Help her make it better." "Yes, ma'am, regularly." A murmur ran through the crowd. "Can you describe what that pressure looked like?" Monthly targets. We'd have unit meetings where Captain Morrison would put up numbers. Arrests, citations, stops. Units that were below average would be called out. Officers would be told they were not pulling their weight. Some officers were passed over for promotions. One was demoted from detective back to patrol. Did Captain Morrison ever specify where these arrests should come from? Marcus nodded. He called them soft target areas, places where people were less likely to complain or afford lawyers. The Riverside District, the Washington Heights area, the East End, all low income, all predominantly people of color. And what happened if you objected? You learned not to. Officer Peterson questioned the policy once in a meeting. He was transferred to the graveyard shift and spent the next 2 years on desk duty. Morrison stood, his face red. This is a lie. Council President, this officer is part of Commissioner Carter's vendetta against me. Captain Morrison, sit down, Walsh said sharply. You'll have your turn. Jasmine continued. Detective Webb, I want to ask you about your own conduct. Prior to entering the accountability program, your stop statistics showed significant racial disparities. Were you aware of these disparities at the time? Marcus appreciated that she didn't hide his own failings. It gave his testimony more weight. No, ma'am. I thought I was doing my job, following instincts. But I realize now that those instincts had been shaped by the culture of the department. A culture where certain people were seen as inherently more suspicious, more dangerous, more deserving of scrutiny. And where did that culture come from? From leaders like Captain Morrison, who treated policing as a numbers game instead of public service. When you're told to hit quotas, you take shortcuts. You stop people you maybe shouldn't stop. You search cars you maybe shouldn't. You arrest people for things you'd give a warning for in a different neighborhood because you need the numbers. Jasmine clicked to another slide. This is your stop data from before you entered the accountability program, and this is your data from the past 4 months. What changed? I did, Marcus said simply. With proper training, with accountability, with a partner who showed me a better way. Officer Thompson, I learned to police without bias. My stops are more justified now. My community interactions are better. And you know what? I'm actually more effective because people trust me now. Morrison's lawyer jumped up. The commissioner has clearly coached this witness. No one coached me, Marcus said firmly, turning to face Morrison directly. Captain, you taught me to be a certain kind of cop. Commissioner Carter taught me to be a better one. That's the truth. The chamber erupted in applause. Walsh gavelled for order. Over the next 2 hours, more witnesses testified. Officers who had been pressured, transferred, or demoted for not meeting quotas. Community members who had been targeted with frivolous arrests. A data analyst who showed how the patterns were statistically impossible to explain without systematic bias. Then it was Morrison's turn. He took the stand confidently, ready to defend his 30 years of service. Captain Morrison, his lawyer began. These allegations paint you as some kind of villain. Tell us, in your own words, what you were trying to accomplish. I was trying to keep this city safe, Morrison said, his voice strong. In 30 years, I've seen crime rise and fall. I've seen neighborhoods go from dangerous to safe. And back again. Effective policing requires metrics. It requires officers who are proactive, who don't just respond to calls but prevent crimes. That's what I demanded from my units. And these racial disparities in stops and arrests. Crime statistics show that certain neighborhoods have higher crime rates. It's not racism to focus resources where they're needed most. Jasmine's eyes narrowed. Now it was her turn to cross-examine. Captain Morrison, you mentioned crime statistics. Let's look at them. She pulled up a new chart. These are actual crime reports in the South District. Burglary rates are actually higher in the Oakmont neighborhood, a wealthy, predominantly white area, than in Riverside. Yet Riverside had 4 times as many arrests for suspicious behavior and loitering. How do you explain that? Morrison's confidence wavered slightly. Different communities require different approaches, or different standards. Let me ask you directly, did you ever send an email instructing officers to target low-income neighborhoods because they were, and I quote, soft targets? That's taken out of context. It's a yes or no question, Captain. Morrison's jaw clenched. I may have used that terminology, but what I meant was, you meant that poor people are easier to exploit, Jasmine said, her voice cutting, that they're less likely to complain, less able to fight back, more vulnerable to a system that's supposed to protect them but instead preys on them. That's not. I have 17 emails from you, Captain Morrison, explicitly setting quota numbers. I have testimony from 12 officers about being threatened for not meeting those quotas. I have data showing that under your command, arrests increased while convictions decreased, meaning you were pressuring officers to make arrests you knew wouldn't hold up in court, all to generate revenue from fines and court fees. Tell me, Captain, how much money did your proactive policing generate for the city in the past 3 years? Morrison's lawyer objected, but Jasmine was already clicking to the slide. $47 million in fines and fees, 83% of which came from neighborhoods, representing only 32% of the city's population. You turned policing into a regressive tax on the poor. The chamber was silent now, every eye on Morrison. I did my job, Morrison said, but his voice had lost its strength. You did a job, Jasmine corrected, but it wasn't protecting and serving. It was extracting and exploiting. The council deliberated for 45 minutes while the chamber waited in tense silence. Marcus sat with Jamal, his career hanging in the balance. He just testified against one of the most powerful figures in the department. There would be consequences, win or lose. You did good, Jamal whispered. We'll see, Marcus replied. Finally, the council returned. President Walsh's face was grave, but determined. This council has reviewed the evidence presented by Commissioner Carter and the testimony of numerous witnesses. We find that Captain Thomas Morrison did institute and enforce an illegal quota system for arrests and citations, that he did target specific neighborhoods based on socioeconomic and racial demographics, and that he did retaliate against officers who objected to these practices. Morrison sat frozen. Effective immediately, Captain Morrison is suspended without pay pending criminal investigation by the district attorney's office. We are also recommending the city examine all arrests and citations issued under his command for potential wrongful prosecution. The chamber erupted in cheers and shouts. Morrison's face went white, then red. "This is political," he shouted, standing. "I'm being made a scapegoat for policies that have existed for decades." "That's exactly the problem, Captain," Walsh said coldly. "They have existed for decades, and today that ends." Walsh turned to Jasmine. "Commissioner Carter, this council grants you full authority to implement your reform program department-wide. You have our complete support." More applause. Jasmine nodded, professional but inside feeling a wave of vindication mixed with the weight of what came next. Winning was one thing. Actually transforming a broken system was another. As the hearing adjourned, Morrison pushed past Marcus in the aisle. "You're finished, Webb," he hissed. "You think you're safe because of her? She'll be gone in 2 years and you'll still be here, with us. We'll remember." Marcus met his eyes steadily. "There is no us anymore, Captain. That brotherhood you're talking about, it was never real. It was just people protecting each other's worst instincts." Morrison stormed out. Jasmine approached Marcus. As the chamber cleared, "Thank you, Detective. I know what that cost you. It cost me less than doing nothing would have," Marcus said. I hope this actually changes things." "It will," Jasmine said firmly. "One officer at a time, one policy at a time, one day at a time. It will." The months following the hearing were tumultuous. Morrison's suspension became termination when the DA's investigation uncovered financial irregularities. He'd been receiving consultation fees from the private company that processed the city's traffic fines, a kickback scheme disguised as legitimate income. He was indicted on corruption charges and eventually pleaded guilty to avoid trial. He served 18 months in federal prison, a short sentence, but enough to destroy the career he'd spent 30 years building. Several other officers who had been part of Morrison's inner circle resigned or retired, rather than face the new accountability standards. Some went loudly, claiming they were being driven out by political correctness. Others left quietly, knowing their time was up. But something remarkable happened. The officers who remained, the majority, began to embrace the changes. With the pressure to hit quotas gone, with proper training provided, with community oversight that actually protected good officers while weeding out bad ones, the culture began to shift. Marcus became, improbably, a leader in that shift. He didn't want the role. He still felt too much shame about who he'd been. But Jamal pushed him. "Dude, you're the perfect person to mentor other officers," Jamal said. "You've been where they are. You know the excuses, the rationalizations, the blind spots. Who better to help them see past those things?" So Marcus became a trainer, teaching other officers what he'd learned. Some resented him, the traitor who'd testified against Morrison. But others listened. They saw that Marcus's numbers were better now, his community relationships stronger, his job satisfaction higher. "I used to go home exhausted and angry every night," Marcus told a room of skeptical officers during a training session. "I thought it was the job, but it was the way I was doing the job. I was fighting the people I was supposed to serve. Now, I go home tired sometimes, but not angry, because I'm actually helping people." Crime rates didn't skyrocket, as Morrison's defenders had predicted. In fact, they fell. It turned out that community trust was more effective at preventing crime than aggressive enforcement. Report rates went up. People were actually calling the police now when they saw crimes, because they believed officers would help rather than harm. Use of force incidents dropped by 67% in the first year. Complaints against officers fell by 73%. And officer retention improved. Good cops didn't want to leave anymore because they weren't being pressured to compromise their value. Jasmine worked 18-hour days, pushing her reforms through bureaucratic resistance, political pressure, and institutional inertia. There were setbacks, a controversial shooting that tested public trust, budget battles, union pushback, but she never wavered from her vision, a police force that actually protected and served all citizens equally. She visited Mama Ruth every Sunday. Her grandmother's memory was fading faster now, but some things remained clear. "You did it, baby," Mama Ruth said one afternoon, holding Jasmine's hand. "You made it better." "I'm trying, Mama. It's slow work. The important work always is." 3 months later, Mama Ruth passed away peacefully in her sleep at 88 years old. Jasmine spoke at her funeral about the woman who had raised her to believe that one person could make a difference, that change was possible, that justice was worth fighting for. Marcus attended the funeral standing in the back. He'd never met Mama Ruth more than that once, but she'd changed his life by raising the granddaughter, who refused to accept him as he was, and demanded he become better. 2 years after the hearing, the changes in the Metropolitan Police Department had become a national model. Police departments from across the country sent representatives to study Commissioner Carter's reforms. The data was undeniable: crime down 23%, community trust up 56%, officer satisfaction up 89%, use of force incidents down 67%, complaints down 73%. Jasmine was invited to speak at a national conference on police reform. She stood before an audience of chiefs, commissioners, and reform advocates from across the country. "Change is possible," she told them, "but it requires 3 things: courage, accountability, and a genuine belief that people, both officers and citizens, are capable of being better than they've been." She told the story of Detective Webb, without using his name, an officer with bias he didn't recognize, who was given a choice: change or leave, who chose to do the hard work of confronting his own assumptions. "That officer is now one of our most effective trainers," she said, "not because he's perfect, but because he's honest about his journey. He tells other officers, 'I was part of the problem, and now I'm part of the solution. You can be too.'" The room gave her a standing ovation. After the speech, she was approached by the mayor of Philadelphia. "We want you back," he said. "Chief of police, you can name your salary." Jasmine smiled. "I appreciate that, but I'm home now. This is where I belong." Back in the city, Marcus was having his own moment of recognition. The department was holding its annual awards ceremony, and he'd been selected for the newly created Excellence in Community Policing Award. He almost didn't attend. The old guard officers would be there, the ones who still resented him, who still saw him as Morrison's traitor. But Carmen insisted. "You earned this. Own it." So Marcus stood in his dress uniform, while Commissioner Carter presented him with a plaque and spoke about his transformation. "Detective Webb represents what this department can be," she said. "Not perfect, but committed to growth. Not above criticism, but willing to learn. Not defending the old ways, but building something better." The applause was mixed. Some enthusiastic, some polite, some absent, but it didn't matter. Marcus knew the truth about himself now, both the good and the bad, and he was working every day to be better than he'd been. After the ceremony, a young black officer approached him. A rookie, maybe 23. "Detective Webb, I just wanted to say thank you. I almost quit last year because of how some of the older officers were treating me. But you and Officer Thompson showed me there were good people here trying to change things, made me want to stay and be part of that." Marcus felt something break open in his chest. This was why it mattered. This was the point. "Thank you for telling me that, Marcus, and thank you for staying. We need officers like you." 5 years after that rainy night in September, the city had changed in ways both measurable and intangible. The Metropolitan Police Department had the highest public approval rating in its history. 73% of citizens reported trusting the police to handle incidents fairly, up from 31% 5 years earlier. Officer diversity had increased dramatically. The department actively recruited from the communities it served, and those officers stayed because the culture supported them. The city council had passed a comprehensive police reform package, making many of Commissioner Carter's policies permanent rather than dependent on her tenure, and the Riverside neighborhood, the projects where Jasmine had grown up, had become a focus of community police partnership programs. Officers now worked alongside community leaders on everything from youth mentoring to violence interruption programs. Crime in Riverside was down 41%. High school graduation rates were up 28%. New businesses were opening. Hope was returning. Commissioner Jasmine Carter stood at a podium in Riverside Community Center, the same building where she'd attended after-school programs as a child. Today, it was being renamed the Ruth Carter Community Justice Center, in honor of her grandmother. Mama Ruth believed that justice wasn't just about punishment. Jasmine told the assembled crowd. It was about redemption, second chances, the possibility of change. That's what we've tried to build here, a system that holds people accountable but also believes they can become better. She looked out at the audience. Her mother, Sarah, now 67 and finally retired, sitting in the front row. Officer Jamal Thompson, now a sergeant, training the next generation. Captain Rodriguez, who had supported her reforms from day one and was now deputy commissioner, and Marcus Webb, now a lieutenant, head of the Community Relations Division, sitting with his wife Carmen and their 2 kids who were home from college. After the ceremony, Marcus approached Jasmine. "Commissioner, I wanted to thank you for that night 5 years ago, for not just firing me, for believing I could change." Jasmine smiled. "I didn't believe you could change, Lieutenant. I believed you had to choose to change. And you did. That was all you. Still, you gave me the chance." "Someone gave me chances too," Jasmine said, thinking of her teachers, her scholarship, every person who had seen potential in a little girl from the projects. "That's how it works. We receive grace, and then we extend it to others." Marcus nodded. Then he said something he'd wanted to say for 5 years. "I'm sorry, for that night, for making you wait in the rain, for treating you like you didn't belong somewhere you had every right to be, for being the kind of cop who made people scared instead of safe. I'm sorry." Jasmine met his eyes. "I forgive you, Marcus. I forgave you a long time ago. The question is, have you forgiven yourself?" Marcus thought about that, about the officer he'd been and the man he'd become, about the mistakes he'd made and the amends he was still making. "I'm working on it," he said. "That's all any of us can do." On her wall now were photographs, the mayor presenting her with a key to the city, President Obama shaking her hand at a White House police reform summit, her department's new recruits, the most diverse class in history. But her favorite photo was simpler, Mama Ruth on her 85th birthday, smiling with that knowing look that said she'd always believed this day would come. Jasmine had been offered bigger positions, chief of police in major cities, even a cabinet position in Washington, but she'd turned them all down. This was her city. These were her people. This was where she could make the most difference. Her phone buzzed, a text from her mother. "So proud of you, baby. Mama Ruth is smiling down on us." Jasmine smiled, tears pricking her eyes. 5 years ago, she'd stood in the rain while a cop who didn't know who she was made her wait, made her feel small, made her remember every indignity she'd ever suffered for being black in spaces that weren't meant for her. But she hadn't let that moment break her. She'd let it fuel, and now that same cop was helping to build a better system. The department that had protected its worst was now becoming a model for the nation. The city that had seemed unchangeable had changed. Not perfectly, not completely. There was still work to do, always work to do. But it was better, measurably, undeniably better. And that was worth everything. Sometimes justice comes slowly. Sometimes it comes from unexpected places. Sometimes the people who wrong us become the people who help us change the world. Dr. Jasmine Carter could have responded to humiliation with revenge. She could have fired Marcus Webb on day one and been justified. She could have let her anger define her leadership. Instead, she chose something harder: transformation over punishment, accountability with redemption, justice that makes people better, rather than simply making them suffer. And Marcus Webb could have refused. He could have fought back, protected his pride, defended his old ways. He could have resigned rather than face his own bias. Instead, he chose something harder, admitting he was wrong, doing the work to change, becoming uncomfortable so that others might feel safe. Their story reminds us that systems don't change by themselves. They change when people with power choose to use it for justice. When people without power refuse to accept injustice. When individuals decide that today is the day they become better than they were yesterday. You have that power too. Maybe you're not a police commissioner or a detective, but you have influence in your world, in your workplace, your community, your family. You have choices about how you treat people who are different from you, how you respond when you're confronted with your own biases, how you use whatever authority you have. The question is, what will you choose? Will you defend the way things have always been? Or will you have the courage to demand better? Will you protect your comfort, or will you embrace the discomfort that comes with growth? Will you be part of the problem or part of the solution? Jasmine Carter chose justice. Marcus Webb chose change. Both paid a price for their choices. Both gained something more valuable than what they lost. Now it's your turn to choose. If this story inspired you, if it made you think, if it reminded you that change is possible, share it. Hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel for more stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things in the fight for justice. Because the world changes one story at a time, one choice at a time, one person at a time. Be the change your community needs.